Psalm 100 from the Paleo-Hebrew Scriptures. Make a loud noise. Shout for joy unto Yahweh the ever-living. Go to him before his face with a ringing cry of joy. Know him intimately and completely, for he, Yahweh the ever-living, is Elohayim. He has fashioned us, working by labor to produce us, and not we ourselves. We are his people and the small cattle of his pasturing. Go to him, and to his gate with confession, thanksgiving, praise, into his enclosure with hymns of celebration. Cast forth praise unto him, kneel and place a gift before him. Prosper his name. For Yahweh is beautiful, kind, upright, fair and agreeable. His hasad, desire and mercy, zeal and kindness, endure unto time of long duration. For as far as the eye can see or perceive, to the edge of the horizon and beyond, and his faithfulness circles from age to age perpetually.
Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, and good night, everyone. My name is Noel Joshua Hadley. Hopefully everyone can hear me. I had to turn the volume off on my computer because it is beeping nonstop, like right as I was going live, and I couldn't fix it in time. So turned it off, and I can't hear anything. Hopefully you can hear me just fine. If I am rambling incoherently, like you can't, if I'm rambling incoherently at any given time, please do let me know. But if you can't hear me tonight, please do let me know. For anyone in the live, the world according to Greece, an esoteric analysis. Now, I've been in my own personal torment all day over this, partly because, this took me 3 weeks of my life to write. Believe it or not, I thought it would take me, I could just shoot this thing, down the chute in a few days, 3 days tops, 7 to 10 page paper. It ended up being 55 pages. So that's 3 weeks of listening to scene for scene analysis of this movie, listening to the songs, having them stuck in my head. I was about a week ago at this point. You could see I published it 5/13. Today's the 19th. So pretty hot off the press. And I was driving with my wife and my children, and I just said to her, I was like, I can't take it anymore. Like I'm done. I'm done with this. And she knew what I meant. Had to move past it. But anyways, this was well worth it. And I think for everyone who either reads this report or even listens to this, I think you're going to get something out of this. And I think you'll be surprised. I think a lot of people are going to snub this thinking like, oh, musical, I don't like musicals. Well, this report isn't about the musical necessarily aspect of it. This is dripping wet and soggy with the esoteric. And first I want to show you guys where you guys can pick this up. This is, there's a link directly under this video for the store, and these are just a series of my papers that you can download on there, and you can see it right here, The World According to Greece, an Esoteric Analysis. And for those of you that are in the Tech Book Club, that would be Patreon, for every single dollar you support this ministry with, we give that same amount back to you every single month, usually around the 10th of the month, in the form of a coupon in which you can come in and you could redeem these. And so that's a great way to, amongst our many other products and our vendors and books and so on and so forth. But you can go in and, simple $5 a month, you come in, download a paper, read it. So what I was saying is that I wasn't sure if I wanted to talk my way through this or just read it to you. That's what I was in torment about all day, thinking about all day as I was going about my day. And I decided to go old school. We're going to go old school tonight on Talk, and I am just going to read this to you. So just get a cup of Joe or a glass of wine, depending on, it's 5 o'clock somewhere, right? depending on where you are in the world, what time zone you want to be attached to, let's put it that way. And just enjoy the world according to Greece and esoteric analysis as I soothe you with my reading voice, talking about the hidden aspects of this amazing musical. Greece is a matter of diplomatic diplomacy in my household. My wife was a cheerleader when we met in high school. She was 15, I was 35. No, really, we were just a couple years apart. I was a junior, she was a sophomore. So, as a point of reference, that would be the tail end of the last century for all you kids out there. Our first date was the ice skating rink. Our second date was Disneyland. Early on, I distinctly recall that she laid down two very simple ground rules: jewelry and Greece. Jewelry, she insisted, made for terrible gifts. I took a mental note of that. To this day, I still don't buy her jewelry. And we've been married for 25 years, not including almost 25 years, not including, of course, our dating years. So it's been a success. She also happened to have a seething distaste for the movie. Wait, what? To this very day, she has offered no explanation as to why. And we're talking about Greece. Her name is Sarah. Sarah and I have been married for nearly 25 years as of this writing, giving ample opportunity to lay the Grease soundtrack onto the turntable. I just played it the other day, by the way. Sometimes the deed is done while she is washing the dishes, and I should probably be in there helping her, turning up the speakers for Summer Nights or You're the One I Want. I have even been known to shout into the kitchen, "Hey, babe, they're playing our song," to which her groans can often be heard. Jokes are only supposed to be funny if they're true, even dad jokes. And as it turns out, this one is far funnier than I ever could have dreamed or imagined. Greece is an esoteric tale involving pre-existence, soul flames, mistaken identity, rediscovery, and transformation. You could also expect a lot of nihilism and Carl Jung in there. Remember when Danny shows off for Sandy by swinging the hammer upon a high striker? The bell is going ring a ding 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 on this one. It is so esoteric that it demands an esoteric analysis, and I aim to give one. So you may be happy to know that Sarah bore the burden of being my research partner during a recent viewing, so long as I agreed to keep my arm around her during all the triggering musical numbers, and there are several. But then about 5 minutes into it, my wife realized something. She'd never seen this movie before. Wait, what? So the movie, which she has reserved a decades-long disdain for, has been miscategorized and is once again brought under investigation. In a stunning turn of events, Grease was a patsy. She had simply assumed those songs were from the movie that she remembered. Adding to the list of mystical places of Arthurian lore, like Lyonesse or the Castle of the Fisher King, identifying the true culprit would unfortunately require the miraculous reappearance of Blockbuster Video on a foggy night, being the likely scene of the crime, a dowsing rod, and a VCR. Perhaps some mysteries are best left buried in the past. Grease, the tale of the bamboo cutter and Carl Jung. Technically, Grease isn't a fairy tale, but it is rooted in one and might as well be. And from this moment on, I'll just be calling it a fairy tale. After we are through here, I dare you to read my Princess Kaguya paper and then tell me there are not connections to be found. The tale of the bamboo cutter is one of the earliest preserved fairy tales, dating back to the 9th or 10th century in Japanese folklore. So now we are in the 1,000-year reign territory. That only came to my attention after Studio Ghibli turned it into an anime film, The Tale of Princess Kaguya. And I sat on the couch with my baby daughter and sobbed. I don't cry often, but I will cry. I will cry in Braveheart. I will cry in Terminator 2, and I will cry every time in Princess Kaguya. I can't help it. Pick your version. Both tell the story of Princess Kaguya, a pre-existent representation of the feminine divine and daughter of God, who arrives hoping to flesh out her heavenly reality upon the earth. Now, I want to quickly explain. Some of you are wondering, like, feminine divine, what does that mean? Well, we live still, for the most part, we still live in a patriarchy, which is, the uh, the the preferred model as far as I'm concerned. I'm sorry if that triggered anyone, but I'll have plenty of triggering moments in here. But the feminine divine is the kind of the missing aspect of this. And I'm not I am very anti-feminist in every way, shape, and form. So this looks different. This is like the true woman. This is the true Eve. So if you've read some of my other papers like Sleeping Beauty, Cinderella, I still haven't gotten to Snow White yet, but I delve into that greatly. So I won't be covering as much of that tonight, but it all relates back to wisdom, the Ruach Hakamaha, our mother in heaven. She she predetermines her entire life in advance. This is speaking of Princess Kaguya, selecting a bamboo forest which closely resembles the Edenic garden. The boy in the bamboo forest, whom she has selected for marriage before she was even born, even plenishing herself with enough riches to make it happen. There's only one catch. Princess Kaguya must forget her prior life in heaven in order to incarnate upon the earth. And this is, of course, the story of preexistence. Though heavenly character is naturally imbued within her, complications quickly arise when Kaguya's adopted father, who she also predetermined, mistakes every possible signpost, confining his daughter to the engineered designs of an earthly woman rather than a true woman. And if you're reading along, you can see I put a capital W there. That's speaking of the true heavenly divine version of woman rather than the, empire of dirt earthly woman, and giving her a literal facelift to do it. The tale of Princess Kaguya is a heartbreaking tragedy and an all too familiar one because it resembles the world we live in. The ending to Greece attempts a different approach. Carl Jung is no stranger in these parts. I have sourced the Swiss doctor and his pupil, Marie-Louise von Franz, on occasion due to their having viewed fairy tales as the purest, simplest expressions of the collective subconscious mind, and I happen to agree with them. The breakthrough happened in my Sleeping Beauty and the Feminine Divine paper. Therefore, the following information is review. It'll be a couple paragraphs of review, but absolutely necessary in understanding the Greece narrative. According to Jungian psychology, I want to say Jungian psychology, but you heard me say Jung. So if I ever call him Carl Jung, I get a free pass at that. The archetypal psychology within the greater collective unconscious is a checkerboard of duality, which Jung calls the anima and animus to contend with. So those are two words. You want to jot them down, put them in front of you, anima and animus. Without understanding those two words, we're going to totally not get Greece at all. What are the anima and animus, pray tell? I'm glad you asked. The animus is the unconscious masculine side of a woman, whereas the anima is the unconscious feminine side of a man. Are you confused by that? So the way a woman projects a man is her unconscious masculine side. It doesn't mean that what a true man actually is. It's how she perceives man in her masculine side, her subconscious masculine side. It's the same thing with a man, the way he perceives a woman. It may not be true woman, it's his subconscious woman that he's projecting. Both the anima and the animus make up the two primary anthropomorphic archetypes or archetypes of the unconscious mind. For clarity purposes, man's collective unconscious has a way of transcending the personal psyche and forming the shadow archetype of woman into his image rather than what a woman actually happens to be. This is the anima. So again, the anima is the feminine side of a man's subconscious or unconscious. On the flip, the animus is woman's masculinity, whereby she forms man into her image. Got it? Any more questions? I'll give you a couple examples here. So in a recent update to The World According to Dolly's Braces, I updated, I don't know, 20, 30 pages to it or something like that. It's my go-to 007 paper. I compared Honey Rider, the first Bond girl, to Eve, believe it or not. You have to see it to believe it, to Aphrodite and Saint Margaret, as well as the Millennial Kingdom narrative. That's kind of a mouthful, isn't it? Anyways, Honey Rider's right there. She was the very first, she's accredited to being the first Bond girl in Dr. No. She also serves as a prototype of the many Bond girls to follow. So allow me to clear a few things up. Honey Rider is not a perfect Eve, nor is she a perfect Aphrodite, and she is certainly far removed from Saint Margaret. She does, however, embody the anima. That is not to say she is the true heavenly woman, but rather the woman as man perceives her. She is the anima. Now, I have a picture of John Rambo there from Rambo 3. And I want to point this out to all the ladies out there who think that men are being unfair to women in the movies by how they, want them to look a certain way. So why do I have a picture of John Rambo? I have yet to write a paper on Rambo, but I totally should though. Not sure what I will call it yet. Stay tuned. I include Rambo to make a point. You can see all my typos in here. Look, I say to make a point. Rebecca, where are you at? Men are accused by women of having unrealistic expectations, and that may be so, but then look at how men wish to perceive man, ripped and chiseled as a Renaissance statue, procreating with a tree trunk. I'm not seeing the double standard. Men want to make heroes of men with sweaty, pulsating curves, and well, they naturally cast women through the same filter. So women always, when they criticize, the look of women on film, they forget like when a man goes sees a movie, he wants to see that. He wants to see other men. It's totally heterosexual, but he wants to see men ripped and sweaty and their muscles like, just ripped. That's what they want to see in other men. Now compare the same two sexes through the animus perspective in chick flicks. Twilight, I have no tolerance for. I've never seen those, never read them. But The Princess Bride is screened annually with a bottle of wine and a flurry of quotable lines between my wife and I. Indeed, movies do span the divide. Usually, though, men find themselves frustrated and completely incapable of relating to the effeminate archetype which the animus storytellers construe for them in the chick flick genre. Often the emotionally detached male is cast as the antagonist, whereas the androgynous male, that is to say, the emotionally in sync masculine side of a woman, fills in for the protagonist. Give you a quick example of that. I was I can't even remember the name of it. I saw it probably 15 years ago. Went with my wife to see it. It was some chick flick about getting married. She was her fiance was like, there was this one scene where he was emotionally detached and uninterested in planning the big day. And immediately it was like, oh, he's the villain. I knew it right then. I'm like, oh, she's not going to go through marrying this guy. And then there was this other guy who was like really into the planning the wedding, and so that's the animus right there. That's not true man. It's just the effeminate version of man. So Greece, the time is the place, is the motion. At its core, Grease is a movie about making a break and finding identity apart from the Americana inherited to them by their parents during the suburban sprawl of post-war society. But then it is also very much a 1978 movie recreating the mid-20th century in its own image, 1958 specifically, indicating that existentialism will likely find its home here, and it does. This is clearly an existential movie. Though if it was made in the 50s, it would also be an existential movie, I'm sure. Though the phrase had yet to be coined during his life, the foundational precursor to existentialism was none other than Nietzsche, Friedrich Nietzsche, the Darth Vader and enforcer of modern philosophy. Among the many ideological toxins that have eroded the moral code of the West, nihilism is by far the most corrosive. I would venture to say it is the worst, most devastating thing that has happened to the West. That and actually feminism, they probably go hand in hand. Nihilism advertises a life that is fundamentally meaningless. Happiness exists only where it can be found. And that didn't work out so well for Princess Kaguya, did it? When Nietzsche wrote God is dead and we have killed him, Darth was arguing for a forced creation of our own individual values apart from an objective external power defining morality. And again, look where that has gotten us. Not in a good place. Let's put it this way. Nietzsche is like government bureaucracy in that nihilism ended up bringing more pain upon the world by simply attempting to fix it. All we really needed is a paved street, but now there are more potholes than when we started. The leading voice of existentialism in the mid 20th century was Jean Paul. I assume you pronounce this Sartre. Anytime I see a French word, like forget about it. Like I'm sorry. I mean, I even have a French name, Noel. I probably like the French are probably shaking their head. I can't even say my own name right. Well, anyways, he famously argued that existence precedes essence. And this meant that individuals must define their own meaning in an absurd world. So there is the frame and, in fact, the plot line to Greece in a nutshell. Teenage existentialism. Princess Kaguya, on the other hand, is anti-nihilistic. It is so anti-nihilistic as to promote the tragedy behind a God is dead statement when acknowledging that our pre-existent heavenly state is forgotten and that our mission here on earth is to realign with it. Perhaps someday we will receive our very own Lost the musical, because Greece will then receive its ideological counterbalance by the way of song and dance. The failing Broadway industry can finally fall in alignment. You're welcome. Y'all remember Lost, don't you? It aired on ABC from 2004 to 2010. And for some unexplained reason, I never missed a single episode, not even the pilot. I think I missed like the first 3 minutes of it when the pilot came on, and I called my wife into the room. I'm like, hey, you got to see what's on TV. And then, of course, we never missed another episode. The key to understanding the show was in the character of John Locke, reminding us of the philosopher John Locke. Contrary to nihilism, Locke promoted a memory-based continuity, where an identity is rooted in consciousness and memory, which is to say, you are the same person to the extent that you can remember the past. And this is really important. This is why everyone kept basing their present circumstances upon memories from a past life in the show Lost. They were dead on an island. Oops, spoiler alert. Sorry if you haven't seen it, but no apologies. You just saved like 7 years of your life. But they couldn't elevate to the next chapter of eternity until they learned to transcend the pains of the past. And that's why John Locke is such a key figure there. Greece is a pre-existence tale, and I'm sticking with it. There's nothing you can do to convince me otherwise. So save yourself the effort. Enjoy the delectable dish I have prepared for you if you haven't already. There is a popular fan theory that Danny and Sandy actually drowned during their summer fling, and the entire movie is a coma-induced dream before they pass away. Or actually, by some theories, it's just Danny that died and not Sandy. Cute, but so wrong. Pre-existence is classified as a mystery of heaven. If you need caught up to speed, then I suggest you read The Earth as a Womb. That's a paper I did. Of course, I've done a lot of YouTube talks on this as well, because I don't intend to cover the rudimentary principles. The movie begins on a beach. Actually, it begins with the Paramount Studios logo, reminding us of the Watchers that arrived on Mount Hermon in First Enoch, delivering the worthless mysteries of heaven. And of course, we were talking about the mysteries of heaven. There are mysteries of heaven and worthless mysteries, of which they have given the worthless. There's some irony. Well, back on the beach, Sandy and Danny experience the summer nights, which they will later sing about. The first shot we have of them is the sun setting on their love while they kiss. It is the summer of 1958. As we shall soon discover with the mirrors, Sandy is Sandy, while Danny is somebody else entirely. Currently, he is her animus. Is Sandy his anima, though? I believe so. Danny's problem is that he is about to have an existential crisis rather than a Lockean one, thanks in part to the nihilist. Danny appears to be wearing a red jacket rather than the leather T-bird uniform that we will come to identify him in. And it's the only time we see him in a red jacket, too. They were going with the James Dean look, obviously. And James Dean, as everybody knows, died in a car crash in 1955. Or did he? But I can't help but think of Adam from the Bible. Adam is closely related to the Hebrew word Adam, which means red, to Adama, which means earth, and finally to Dam, speaking of blood. There is plenty of that going on here. So here's actual the first 3 lines from the film. Sandy says, "I'm going back to Australia. I won't see you again." Danny says, "Don't talk that way, Sandy." And Sandy says, "But it's true. I've had the best summer of my life. Now I have to go away. It isn't fair." This exchange between Sandy and Danny just so happens to be the first 3 lines spoken in the film. Australia is a long ways away. Why did the writers pick that location rather than, say, Wisconsin or New Jersey? In California terms, they might as well have had her move from Reseda to San Diego or maybe even Orange County, because to a teenager without a car, that is a world removed. We are furthermore not told how far the beach is from Rydell. Rydell is the high school in Greaseland. The distance from Leo Carrillo State Beach in Malibu, where they filmed it, to Venice High School, which served as the beach filming location as well as the Rydell exterior shots, is approximately 25 to 30 miles. Early on in the film, Rizzo criticizes the beach as a distant and seemingly impractical location to meet boys and spend one summer, so we know there is a measurable distance. Sandy is convinced that she is returning to Australia. She furthermore has no knowledge of where Danny is attending school. The Earth is a big place. Hell, Los Angeles is a world unto itself. You see what I did there? Although it is true that Grease never takes itself too seriously, even musicals require a basic narrative logic, not a sinkhole large enough to sink Rydell in. Having Sandy mysteriously enroll at Danny's school with no further exposition is indeed a great leap, where internal consistency is concerned, but it was probably intended that way. I suggest to you that the unknown radius between the beach and Rydell and their purview from Australia is intended to disorient us. I further suggest that the beach is a symbolic stand-in for paradise, aka the hidden wilderness. I've done a lot of work on that, the blessed realm, and that the two are soul flames in the sea of souls. Now, some of you are going to be listening to this going, okay, dude, this guy's taking a huge leap of logic here. Just see this through. I think you're going to start to see that the pieces connect. Danny is symbolically about to depart for a material existence in the womb of the earth, whereas Sandy is expected to stay behind. So again, subconsciously, under the currents, this is what I see happening. Case in point, Sandy takes Danny's picture as if to preserve what is about to be lost. Danny also wants to remember her, but has something else in mind. Sandy is a virgin, but what of Danny? This is made pointedly clear when Danny maneuvers from sweet kisses to a passionate one, and Sandy recoils. We then receive the following exchange. Sandy says, "Danny, don't spoil it." Danny says, "Sandy, it's only making it better." Danny, is this the end? Of course not. It's only the beginning. Clues are everywhere. There is yet another tip-off to the pre-existence narrative. Danny and Sandy are crossing the threshold from spiritual purity to the material world, one life to another. And also they don't do it. The deed, that is. Danny ends the summer without his rite of passage. Perhaps they will have better luck after the senior carnival. Art is a product of its era and deeply interconnected with the time in which it was created. The decision to hire Barry Gibb for the iconic title track and then to hand Frankie Valli a microphone is certainly interesting in light of that. The Bee Gees were riding the FM airwaves in 1978. Even Grease as a single was quickly certified gold, proving that they had the Midas touch. Frankie Valli, on the other hand, had found his primary success as the frontman of the Four Seasons, with the bulk of their hits landing nearly 2 decades earlier during the Kennedy era. Speaking of which, he did have a recent hit, December 1963, Oh What a Night. And as you can tell from the title, it was transporting the listener in the mid 70s back 1 month short of Camelot. In November 1963, the JFK assassination was a psychodramatic ceremony bent on alchemically transforming America, and I guess you could say the world. The Beatles would then arrive to America in 1964, making way for the Paul is Dead death and rebirth ceremony. If you guys, I'm not going to go into commentary on that, but I do not believe that Paul really died. I don't think that conspiracy pans out, but I do think there's a lot of depth there. And I think it was a death and rebirth ceremony, a purposely intended one for alchemical transformation. Art, therefore, found an expansive crossroads in December 1963. Hopefully, you guys know what I mean by crossroads. Nostalgia is a proven marketing tool that can be used either for good or evil, depending, of course, on which side of the John Locke spectrum you fall upon. Most of the time, it prompts us to pursue something which never truly was to begin with, which is my entire point. Greece is more an expression of post-Watergate and Vietnam 1970s culture rather than Eisenhower's 1950s counterculture, which it claims to cradle. Grease, as an artistic expression, recasts a spotlight upon the original rock and roll experiment as elevated through the metamorphosis of 2 prior decades, dictated by Jean-Paul Sartre. There's that guy I can't pronounce again. Nihilism and the existential teenage crisis. By the way, the existential teenage crisis, and in fact, the teenager, was a rather recent invention of Western society. How recent? You're looking at it. Perhaps more on that later. If you don't know what I'm talking about, try to find a mention of teenagers anywhere in history before the 20th century. Probably can't really go past the Bobby Soxers in the 1940s. It was a total invention. They did not exist. But it's a brilliant technique by our controllers. The opening animation comes to us by way of John Wilson and Fine Art Films. It's reminiscent of the typical limited animation style that we were all accustomed to with 1970 studios, but don't let its simplicity fool you. Grease is a movie about existential identity, and clues are everywhere. We first see an unidentified teenage boy without a face. His hair sure has a story to tell. Is he related to Cousin It? If this were the 90s, I would have thought he was a chia pet. I'm not saying the animators were going for a Woodrow's or Wildman narrative, but if Carl Jung has taught me anything, it's that the effect is the same. The alchemical transformation, I'll be talking about that a lot tonight, from beast to man comes in acquiring knowledge. Ask any teenager. The necessary rite of passage is woman. Well, anyways, we see him waking up in his room, which is kind of interesting considering we just had him on the beach. Pre-existence, right? He's waking up now. You probably won't believe me when I tell you he is rising from the collective subconscious, but in a moment you will. The clock at the foot of the bed reads 7. We are peering in upon a morning scene, obviously, but 7 can also represent spiritual awakening and the bridge between the material and spiritual worlds. He is waking up to the first day of his senior year in high school, a threshold symbolizing yet another profound rite of passage in which the transition from a state of guided innocence to the responsibility of self-determined maturity is made. The rest of his room lies in shambles. On closer inspection, the closet has vomited his possessions. Perhaps that is how he perceives the material world, in errant contrast to the rock poster and the Rydell pendant, which are set up like shrines, and the radio serves as the axis mundi of his existence, which I've covered in Mystery of the Maypole. Try not to overlook the closet. In Jungian terms, a closet is haven for the unconscious mind. It is the inner sanctum where individuals store forbidden aspects of their personality that have been denied or disowned in waking life. Jung actually categorizes it as a part of the shadow self. The shadow self contains repressed desires, instincts, weaknesses, and traits deemed unacceptable by society or the conscious ego. And this is, I'll be talking more about this because this is foundational for understanding not just the fairy tale, but really our own existence. More specifically, the shadow self refers to the personal aspects which a person denies, disowns, or finds shameful. And believe me, the unidentified boy has these traits. Actually, they all do pretty much. It is important to note that the shadow self is not strictly referring to perversities or evil desires. No, the shadow self can also contain repressed positive potentials. The unidentified boy has within him the ability to reach up towards heaven, but his ego keeps getting in the way. His circle of friends certainly don't help either. In the first act, he will be judged harshly by them and for positive shadow traits which they refuse to see in themselves. The unidentified boy makes his way to the bathroom and reveals himself to be John Travolta, aka Danny. His transition and identity is accomplished through a tube of grease and a comb, both of which might as well serve as a MacGuffin in the story. I have mentioned MacGuffins in too many papers to list off here. We have seen martyred saints with the palm branch and the green man, Saint Clare of Assisi with the reliquary and kings of priests of the thousand-year reign. Saint Catherine had the wheel in Hypatia versus the Millennial Kingdom. Saint George and Saint Margaret, the lance and the dragon, and the 7,000-year timeline deception of Saint George. As it pertains to the fairy tale, I have dissected Saint Barbara with the tower and Mary Magdalene and the maiden in the tower. And the list goes on and on and on. They are all saints of the Church of Christ. Danny is a saint of the rock and roll mystery religions, and they too have their MacGuffins. It is curious that the grease which he squeezes out of the tube is treated as a living entity. Are we dealing with the fifth element? Many of you, in fact, most of you, will call that a stretch. Perhaps so. Just try not to forget that the fifth essence is an ethereal substance intended to connect the physical and spiritual realms. We haven't seen the last of this in this movie at all. Unlike the four classical elements, earth, water, air, fire, the fifth is pure, incorruptible, and the animating spirit of the cosmos. The animators want to bring special attention to the grease animating a non-living entity entails. I'm sorry, there should be a period there. They want to spend. Let me try this again. The animators want to bring special attention to the grease, period. Animating a non-living entity entails bridging the gap between material and spiritual essences, transforming inanimate matter into a vessel for consciousness or a conduit for magical power. The Kabbalists, for example, had the golem, which I've already covered in Der Golem and the Batman. We might even take the Gnostic route on this one. If the material world can be amounted to a fallen or entrapped state, perhaps even purgatory itself, or maybe even hell itself, then the sheer act of animating an inanimate object is symbolic of the inner work of alchemy, transforming the lead of the soul into gold. So there is your fifth element. The grease is here to assist Danny in rising above and eventually mastering the material world by awakening the dormant divine spark within. The grease is a MacGuffin intended to teach us all. And that's what all MacGuffins are, really, here to teach us something about the saint. Moving right along with the opening animation, we are introduced to our second unidentified person, and there is no mistaking it this time around. Grease is a modern day fairy tale given its princess story arc. We see the girl waking up in bed, like everyone else, reminding us of Sleeping Beauty. And with Sleeping Beauty comes the princess in exile archetype. Notice the broom and the fireplace. What sort of teenage girl has a fireplace in her room? Do tell, or I guess a broom right next to it. Everything is immaculate, tipping us off to Cinderella and the feminine divine. Assuming you've read that or my Sleeping Beauty paper, then this is all, again, review. There are various feminine divine models, and I've identified hers as the Eve prototype. There's also a Mother Earth prototype in here. I'll get to her later. She is the heavenly woman coming down to earth to inspire man to become man. And if you're reading along, the woman, capital W, inspires lowercase man to become uppercase man. And of course, vice versa. That's man's job to inspire women to become women. She then crosses the room while the animals dress her. I am reminded of Snow White on the Run. Snow White was capable of transforming the scary forest into a haven of kind animals by her graces. That's Eve again. The two doves form a halo resembling antlers. You can see that right here if you're looking at the pictures. And then it's interesting right here, this deer has no antlers. The antler image is intended to contrast the fawn who has none. The princess before us is therefore a child of the forest. And so I do not think I was going too far in comparing Danny to a wild man. In Jungian terms, you could totally do that. The princess is also Olivia Newton-John, aka Sandy, in case you were unaware. Next on our list is Rizzo, the town pump of Rydell. We all knew a girl like this in high school. While doing the preliminary research on this paper, I was alarmed but not surprised to learn that many women claim she is the true hero of the story rather than the princess, thereby outing themselves as common women. Rizzo does have redemptive features, and spreading her legs in the back of a 1948 Ford Deluxe convertible is not one of them. But that is a literal scene in the movie. I figure someone out there needed to read that. Well, what do we see happening? Pantyhose is slung over a stop sign. Do I really need to explain what is going on there? I take those to be her two MacGuffins. The animus in the situation is James Dean, Rizzo's unconscious masculine side, which is kind of interesting too, by the way, that they just had Danny look like James Dean on the beach. She too has a radio, mouthpiece of the rock and roll mystery religion. In fact, the only animated character who arguably does not have a radio at her disposal is Sandy. We likewise see a Rydell pennant on her wall. Who else had the same pennant? Danny. That's not a coincidence on the part of the animators. Rydell serves as the stage for the fallen material world by which Jungians, Lockeans, nihilists, existentialists, and Gnostics alike must wrestle with their own subconscious and deliver answers. Both characters, Danny and Rizzo, will ultimately confront themselves, including their animus and anima, in light of the heavenly princess from down under. We also see a certificate or a diploma which asserts her grounded, earth-based pedigree in the Pink Ladies. And who will be initiated into the Pink Ladies? Sandy will. Education is another theme of Greece, and unsurprisingly, it is tethered to the failures of liberalism. A much better movie would have seen a character or two cut ties with the Department of Education, but apparently we're watching progress in action. Rizzo struggles to put a sweater on as if doing so is unnatural and out of character. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't ever recall seeing Rizzo in a sweater. Quite a pair of sweater stretchers as well. And a rather odd decision from the animators here. You probably have to see a picture of this again. All right. Well, there's the sweater stretchers and a very long neck. Very long. They accentuate that turtleneck there. So in a rather odd decision from the animators, Rizzo puts her turtleneck to the test when her neck stretches to the proportions of a giraffe, laying the groundwork for the incoming hickey. There will be a lot of slut shaming during her incoming school year, and it is obvious that the struggle is real. Contrarily, a dream about a stretching neck has positive connotations. It indicates a push to expand one's awareness, or perhaps a psychological need to overcome stubbornness and embrace change, which I think there's perhaps both things going on right here. Whatever is going on with her neck, Rizzo settles comfortably into the familiar black blouse that we see her wearing on the first day of class, low cut and easily unbuttoned. I suggest to you that her identity is not yet certain, insecure and frustrated as she is, and that deep down inside she desires the heavenly vision of womanhood which Sandy offers. Drawing further attention to the hickey on her neck, a frog hangs next to the mirror. Indeed, a kiss is in the works, as well as a fairy tale. If the princess and the frog is any indication, the metamorphosis will belong to animal, she transforms into a man. But then how many are aware that the frog princess is the far older tale and with variants across Eastern Europe and Greece? In this one, the older variants, the prince must transform the animal bride, inspiring woman to become woman. So everyone always thinks of, the princess and the frog. I'm just saying that that is the you could identify this here as she is the frog. She's not going to kiss a man and turn him into frog. She's the one that needs to be turned into a true woman. And there's actually a lot that will, as this film progresses, will play into that. Metaphysically, the frog symbolizes transformation, a cleansing of toxicity and emotional renewal. Assuming Rizzo embraces the frog by her mirror, then she will experience a metamorphosis involving emotional healing and growth. In either instance, Rizzo is a princess. And as a princess, albeit a fallen one, her task is much like Sandy's in that she must look beyond appearances. So as you can see, a checkerboard of duality is being established. Rizzo represents the dark counterpart to let me say that again. Rizzo represents the dark counterpart to Sandy's innocence, where female autonomy and sexual agency is concerned. She corrupts all that she touches rather than sanitizes. Likewise, the Bible has two brides, Judah and Israel. Israel became a whore, and then Judah, the whore of Babylon. But as I have shown in Mary Magdalene and the women of the Bible, Mary Magdalene was a whore redeemed. We shall have to see if Rizzo follows the same story arc or if the common woman gets their wish in that she remains one of them. The final character, we're still in the opening credits, by the way, guys. That's nice. I just got knocked off. Let me try this again. I must have been doing something right. Hopefully everyone can hear me. All right, we're back. The final character to receive a makeover during the opening animation is Rizzo's on and off boyfriend, Kaneki. 3 members of the T-Birds praise him as their leader while he bends under the hood of his car, souping up the engine. We are not shown a pennant, but the scene is clearly Rydell. According to what we have so far learned, only Sandy is an outsider to the social construct. That's not any ordinary car either. It is the Grease Lightning car, complete with eyes and a mouth. So like the magical ball of living grease, it too is a conscious entity. I suppose that means we can expect an alchemical transformation to follow. The all-engrossing car of Kaneki's dreams consumes him. You don't really see it with the pictures here. You'd have to see the movie, but it actually like eats him and swallows him up, and he pops up in the car. And we're not strictly dealing in metaphor. It literally swallows him whole. Is a death and rebirth ceremony underway? When we see him emerge within the belly of the steel and cast iron beast, Kaneki is very much the untamed wild man whom we witnessed a moment earlier with Danny, void of identity. Living within a car, and a living one at that, can represent a profound shift away from and a detachment from conventional societal structures. From the vantage point of a dream, Kaneki has the pressing need to drive his own life. The car serves as an energy vessel, but life has other plans. By consuming him, Kaneki has likely lost control in waking life, becoming overwhelmed by the emotions and responsibilities associated with the advent of adulthood. The first shot we get of Jeff Conaway as Kaneki is while staring into the mirror. But then the same goes for John Travolta, Olivia Newton-John, and Stockard Channing. Every leading character is introduced to us by way of a mirror. You probably didn't believe me when I told you Grease was an esoteric affair. Well, it is. Most people will turn to through the looking glass, But Greece isn't interested in Lewis Carroll so far as I can tell. No, these are the reflective mirrors of the conscious by which we find our ego. These are the mirrors of Narcissus. Narcissus, from which we get the term narcissist, fell in love with his own reflection, and to the point that he did not even pay attention to the beautiful woman who longed for him. What a jerk. His own reflection eventually betrayed him and drew him into the pool, to which he died by way of drowning. I'm not seeing a redemptive quality to this tale. Maybe narcissism is a bad thing. I went over this already in the Mysteries of Pooh, believe it or not, because Eeyore is one of the I was in that paper that I had the unpleasant duty to inform you that Eeyore is a Gnostic and a covert narcissist. And yet he is so loved. Rydell isn't exactly 100 Acre Wood, but we should probably be on our guard anyways, because you never really know. If the Fisher King of the Grail legend has taught me anything, it's that the ultimate Grail quest is to know thyself, and that the subconscious lies with the fishes. The saying, "don't hold your breath," might as well originate with the idea that a narcissist doesn't like to dive down and get wet. Also, Fisher Amen derives from Yahshua Messiah, that would be Jesus Christ, and takes on deeper meaning. The same can be said of a mirror. The true divine self can be found just beyond the reflective surface of a reflection, but the narcissist will be too occupied dolling himself or herself up to arrive there. That's the amazing thing about a mirror. It does really speak to the divine, but you have to be able to get past the illusion of your reflection to get there. Did you notice how Sandy is the only character who arrives to the mirror as is in the opening credits? If she looked the same at the mirror if she looked the same at the mirror as she did in bed, that is a clue that she was able to gaze beyond her own reflection, piercing the subconscious. For an existentialist, the mirror symbolizes the search for authenticity in the anxious confrontation with the self, highlighting the gap between internal consciousness and how one is perceived by others. You know, the typical high school experience. In a world devoid of inherent meaning, simply looking into a mirror can cause an existential crisis. A reflection is capable of reducing the individual to a fixed object. It can separate the conscious self from the physical body, inciting alienation, especially if the person in question feels the world should revolve around them. A reflection has a way of betraying the participant and making them perceive both everything and nothing at the same time. Sounds like that has to be a terrible feeling. A narcissist doesn't want the world to know who they truly are. The reflection is his or her mask. Remember when I said many women today view Rizzo as the protagonist rather than the antagonist? There's liberalism for you. I propose it is because they are staring into the same mirrors, viewing the same reflections. Perhaps Sandy has no reflection, if you get my drift. Sandy arrives into a situation in which she must perceive herself through the eyes of others and then decide what should be done about their repulsion. Everyone else is their own mirror. The opening animation ends with an illustration of Rydell, which then dissolves into an actual exterior shot of the high school. We observe an excess of pints up energy bounding among the students as they make their way toward the first day of class, all of whom resemble late 20 or 30 years old, whatever. Some of them even look 40 to me. Some of them, if they're 30, they have already lived a hard life. After tormenting the local nerds, T-Bird members Duty, Sunny, and Putsy meet up with their leader, Kaneki, wanting to know how he spent his summer. Kaneki claims to have worked a job lugging boxes in the back of a store, everything that a greaser hates. The others mock his dull blue-collar existence as if Kaneki hasn't lived up to his image, only to stand corrected. He was saving up to buy himself a car. And with a car comes freedom and responsibility, and the mysteries of Makeout Point. A car can elevate their existence to a metaphysical one if they let it. So already, Kanicki's all consuming obsession with the car, like we saw in the opening credits, is reassured. When we encounter Danny again, he is dressed in his usual anti-conformist apparel, hitting on the ladies, all of whom look 30. Cigarette dangling from his 5 o'clock shadow or his mouth. Not the same Danny we encountered only moments ago. Will the real Danny please stand up? Kanicki then pulls him aside and enters the following exchange. Kanicki says, you seen any new broads there? Danny says, nah, same old chicks. Everyone's made them. Danny seems to imply that all the girls of Rydell are hoochie mamas and that he's already partaken. Am I to believe his boredom already on the first day of class? That is not the adolescence that I remember. At the risk of committing slander, I am tempted to believe he is still very much a virgin and covering his tracks with the strumpet card. If his fellow T-Birds were truly capable of seducing the same old chicks with their bag of tricks, then their sudden excitement for the mystical girl on the beach comes across as a distraction and completely unnecessary for the task at hand. Believe me when I tell you, Danny's response holds a purpose. Upon hearing of the fantasy girl, Sonny asks for clarification like, does she put out? Danny detracts from his suggestion when also suggesting, oh, come on, Sonny, is that all you ever think about? Sorry, Danny boy, but the cat is out of the bag. You've bagged the girls, apparently, and your answer is not a satisfactory one. How do I know that? Because in a few short hours, the T-Birds will carry the conversation over to the lunch hour, crooning, tell me more, tell me more. If Danny is to live up to the expectations of their anima, then he has little choice but to look into the mirror and project his mask. Now, we aren't told with clarity how Sandy became friends with Frenchie prior to her senior year at Rydell, but Grease isn't interested in those details. The writers needed an access point to the Pink Ladies by which the princess archetype can be tested and tried. And with Frenchie, I just spelled her name wrong there, and with Frenchie, with an I-E apparently, they had one. Stop asking questions, okay? The gist I get is that Frenchie simply noticed a new face and acted accordingly. In the original musical, Frenchie is portrayed as Sandy's neighbor, which would certainly give this movie more earth-based grounding if they had gone that route, but they didn't. This is, after all, an esoteric analysis, and here's what I see going on. Why not initiate any of the other Rydell girls into the counterculture cult? That's the question that I asked myself before writing this analysis. But then initiating a new unforeseen relationship serves as a catalyst for accelerated spiritual growth and inner healing. The Pink Ladies needed a mirror reflecting what they refused to reflect of themselves, unresolved wounds. By confronting the women of the story were capable of moving from ego to higher consciousness. The quicker the insertion, the better. It's kind of like ripping a Band-Aid off. That's what I see happening here. Stop arguing and just go with it. Rizzo pulls up in a 1948 Studebaker Commander Regal convertible with her two Pink Ladies, Jan and Marty. Even the car is pink. Adorable. It's only the first day of school and already Rizzo looks hungover. Rough summer. So this is what she says. Well, here we are again, in which Marty says, yeah, but this time we're seniors. I think you could all probably relate to that. Hell. Rizzo is speaking of hell, isn't she? If so, then I can't blame her. To a Gnostic, material existence is often viewed as a lower fallen realm created by an ignorant deity, the Demiurge, with the aim of trapping divine sparks and holding them in bondage. I can't speak for Gnosticism, but that pretty much explains my high school experience. Does it explain yours? And of course, the greasers have their existential explanations for escape. Marty's response gives a measure of hope. I'm not at all sorry to have to do this to you. I'm going to bring samsara into the discussion. Samsara is a Sanskrit word representing the continuous process of birth, life, death, and rebirth necessitated by karma, and the cycle of suffering that one seeks to escape through liberation. So, again, the high school experience. In my baseball and Masonic ceremony paper, I explicitly noted how the sport suspiciously follows the cyclical path of the Elysian mysteries, in which Persephone is released for the planting season. She's released from hell, quite literally, and harvest, only to be returned to her husband Hades again, by which we come to winter. Spring equals resurrection and autumn death. The school year traditionally rounds the death side of the equation, which lends to the notion of a Gnostic reincarnation, which is why the senior year of high school serves as a liminal and transitional death and rebirth ritual all on its own. Think, think back upon your own experience. It is the year of last first, in which final rallies, sport games, dances, and weekend hangouts among friends are rehearsed. These are not merely sentimental moments, but hyperactive mile markers for emotional processing, allowing the child to symbolically die to the old dependent self and birth a new identity as an adult. Adding icing to the existential cake and laying it on rather thick is the observable. Man, I'm stumbling with my words tonight. Let me get a little bit more coffee. Laying it on rather thick is the observable fact that teachers embody the only adults whom we see in Greece. Sure, there are a few other notables, like the host of the national dance-off. The parents, though, parents are conspicuously absent from the affairs of their children's lives. How existential is that? It's malpractice for starters. If anything, the lack of Lockean parents certifies Greece as a true nihilist narrative, given that the barriers of objective meaning have been removed from the equation, leaving each teenager to define his or her own reality. Now, Charles Schulz managed the same narrative structure with the very first of his Peanut strips, and in 50 years, he never let up. I've actually read every single strip that Charles Schulz ever did. By removing protective adults, Schulz offered his characters raw emotion and social struggles, forcing Charlie and company to cope with failure and tackle problems, also existential. Teachers were pointedly never shown, and with the way Vince Guaraldi introduced muffled adult voices using a trombone with a plunger mute, the children's anxiety only magnified. So if you remember the wah 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 with the in the cartoons, yes ma'am, wah wah wah. Nearly a decade ago, I covered Schulz, but from a flat Earth angle in The Earth is Not a Spinning Ball of Charlie Brown. The point of that exercise was to show a certain consciousness and a sizable and an acknowledged portion of the Western population that was being systematically scrubbed among the children as a point of programming. To be fair, Principal McGee, Mrs. Murdoch, and Coach Calhoun, those are the teachers in Greece, the three main ones, have a noted on-screen presence and nearly always to lend a heavy hand. I showed their pictures all up here. There they are. That is to say, they play a positive role in helping members of the T-Birds and the Pink Ladies navigate their way through the ever-widening onion peels of purgatory, although mostly in the experiential sense. There simply isn't an established pay grade to explain how far Coach Calhoun went when helping Danny find his game. He ended up running track in the end, every chain smoker's favorite sport. The shoes never really fit Danny well, but there's an existential crisis movie for you. Mrs. Murdoch went that extra mile by helping Kaneki soup up Grease Lightning. She even attended the drag race at the end. I'm not sensing a lot of empirical teaching habits here. If the teaching faculty at Rydell offers fundamental truth, then they must be doing so when the camera is not panned upon them. The writers of Greece are not interested in having their existential struggles straightened out with a little bit of Plato, Augustine, or pseudo-Dionysus, nor are teenage movies as a rule. I can almost hear C.S. Lewis now. What are they teaching them in schools these days? Lewis famously critiqued the education of his day for abandoning objective moral values in favor of relativistic opinions, labeling its students men without chest, quote unquote. And of course, it's only gotten worse over the decades since the 1950s. Nowadays, many of its men have chest, if you know what I mean. Though Rydell's teaching faculty may not be imparting hidden inner knowledge per se, they do act as guides designed to accelerate each student's conscious evolution, self realization, and understanding of reality from various postmodern angles, everything that a Platonist like Lewis rejects. Rather than simply imparting empirical information, Rydell's teachers function as a conduit, helping to awaken the student's inner guru. Remember when I said Grease was more so a 1970s movie than a 1950s movie? I probably did about 45 minutes ago. It rarely tries to be anything else. Looks can be deceiving. The Ford Carter era couldn't be any more evident than with its cast of strong, independent women. Principal McGee is a woman, as is Mrs. Murdoch, the automotive, the automotive instructor. Positioning these two in roles typically associated with the patriarchy was a very sly thing to do. And no, I'm not referencing Rocky. It seems like nearly everyone in this production is a spokesperson for feminism, which is why I suppose the libs may be correct in asserting that Sandy is indeed the antagonist of this story, given the fact that the fairy tale princess is a thorn in the side of nearly everyone. Now, keep in mind that an antagonist is not necessarily the bad person, but I could totally see that Sandy is the antagonist of the story. The only trad female character in this musical universe is Patty Simcox. You can see her picture right there. Rydell's student council vice president nominee, yearbook editor, cheerleader, and all around overachiever, but only in conformist roles. She is popular, peppy, and purposefully annoying to boot. It's like she's attempting to model herself after the princess archetype, so seamlessly embodied by Sandy, but couldn't stick the landing on the trip down from heaven. You almost get the feeling that the writers of Grease deplored the sort of woman who would go down in the yearbook as most likely to be a happy homemaker with children. Rizzo represents everything feminists fought for, and Patty Simcox, everything they gave up. And of course, Sandy is caught in the middle. Which of the two she gravitates towards in the end speaks volumes as to the decade Greece is truly inhabiting. Again, not the 1950s. This is a 1970s feminist movie for sure. I'll let these pictures marinate for a second. If I were to poll your favorite Grease moment, I imagine Summer Nights would top that list. It may be low-hanging fruit, but it is likely the most memorable moment, and for good reason. The two have yet to reunite, Danny and Sandy. Danny thinks Sandy is in Australia, and Sandy doesn't have the faintest clue that Danny attends Rydell. Having Travolta and Newton-John sing a duet from completely opposite sides of the campus, but perfectly in sync, and without their characters being consciously aware of that fact, was indeed a brilliant decision on the part of the songwriters, certifying their soul flame status. The anima and animus couldn't be any more evident than with the two overlapping narratives at play. Watching the scene cut back and forth between women and quite separately the men creates a checkerboard duality while causing us to yearn for the heavenly marriage of spirits, which I discussed at length during my Woman at the Well segment of Mary Magdalene and the Women of the Bible. I recommend reading that if you haven't. Even the most intolerable viewers, driven by a sensory dislike of the musical genre, should at the very least stop and appreciate the fact that Summer Nights celebrates the crossroads between guy films and chick flicks. When the T-Birds croon from the bleachers, tell me more, a mystical pinup girl like Betty Page or Marilyn Monroe are stepping out of the page. And when the girls cry the same, the Prince Charming they've been hearing about for the entirety of their lives has been sighted, though he's come and gone like a flash in the pan. The pep rally. The 1948 Ford Deluxe convertible, which Kaneki pulls up in at Rydell's pep rally, has seen better days. The T-Birds laugh mockingly, with Danny calling it a hunk of junk. Kaneki rebuffs, insisting a paint job and a souped-up engine will have it working like a champ. He furthermore announces his intention to race it at Thunder Road. We have just been introduced to another character, the convertible. The timing of her arrival is no accident. Sandy is at that rally, though again, neither knows about the other quite yet. I mean, he thinks she's off in Australia. Presently, Danny's face seems illuminated as he appreciates the car, dreaming of potential. So you can kind of see the segment of events right there. Kaneki is a hot rodder. And as everybody knows, a hot rodder of the 50s rejected polished factory standard materialism as an act of rebellion. Stewardship over a non-working engine is a silent protest, embodying the outlaw spirit and the counterculture car philosophy that, quote, built, not bought, unquote, is the only true way to bring a machine to life. Clearly, the hunk of junk quip was a surface level jab. The T-Birds have a habit of roasting each other, but only for the intended purpose of male bonding. The art of busting balls is an ancient one, serving as an emotional regulation and a protective shield for male affection. The moment is indeed an intimate one. The insertion of a rival gang, the Scorpions. You could see it up here. So he's checking out the car. Scorpions show up. They pull out their guns and knives. The insertion of a rival gang, the Scorpions, further exemplifies their bonding ritual. As the Scorpions cruise by menacingly, Sonny points out the obvious. This isn't their turf. Their finely polished hot rod is a symbol of dominion, a necessary oppressive rival force, certifying the T-Birds and their hunk of junk as the chosen underdogs. Grease is a story about mirrors, and so the Scorpions can be viewed as a necessary mirror that reflects Kaneki or Danny's potential weaknesses. So Carl Jung would likely assign the Scorpions to the shadow, an unconscious aspect of the self that does not correspond with the ego ideal. Ever hear of projection? It's a thing. Projection happens when someone attributes their own unacceptable thoughts, feelings, traits, or motives onto you. Recognize the signs. By the way, religious people are the biggest at this. I think that they cast the most shadows, particularly self-righteous people. I'm kind of going off script right here, but a self-righteous person, they need you to know how righteous they are and that they're not a sinner. Therefore, they can't sin, right? They can't have weaknesses, they can't have problems. So their only hope, as with their ego, is they're wearing this mask of self-righteousness, is they have to cast the shadows on you. Now you are their problem. All the things that they don't like about themselves, they will cast it on you. This happens all the time in religious communities. So it's a thing. Projection happens when someone attributes their own unacceptable thoughts, feeling, traits, or motives onto you, as I just said. The ego resists and then projects the shadow, creating conflict with their newfound opponent. Quoting Jung, one does not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious. And he's talking about singularity, which is actually a theme of this movie. The Scorpions will make a point of exploiting their blind spots during the school dance. Unlike the female oxytocin bonding system that relies on affection, male bonding is often, I'm going to mispronounce this, as I'm live, vasopressin based, which is a hormone which is activated when men tackle threats together as a team. The necessary male bonding experience is therefore not so much a matter of destroying the rivals, but overcoming the false self through a sacred union of opposites. The shared struggle can perhaps be seen as an order ab chaos ceremony intended to transform a singular warrior and individual ego into a unified identity, sharing the same purposes and fate. The T-Birds' underdog status is further established by Coach Calhoun's pep rally speech. by which we glean that Rydell has had a long-standing losing streak. So there are plenty of underdogs to go around. To add to that, Sandy has accepted the uniform and the duties of a cheerleader. This is her Princess Kaguya moment, if you know what I mean by that. The feminine divine has arrived from heaven, but she is still trying to figure out how the true woman fits into the social construct. Meaning, is she going to just conform to the social construct, which is what we immediately see Sandy doing. It is during Coach Calhoun's speech that Tom, this individual, this strapping young lad right here, the star athlete and captain of Rydell's football team, stares at Sandy longingly. Sandy answers his affection with a gaze of her own. Most likely, the Scorpions are linked to the undefeated Gladiators. So they're going out that night to fight the Gladiators, right? Which is why the Scorpions would show up. Tom is a chosen champion fighter tasked with confronting them. Nearby, students enthusiastically celebrate their coming conflict around a flaming pyre. Though it may be deemed as true by some that a game is never simply a game, for the greasers standing around outside the camp in the outer darkness, the ensuing struggle is nothing short of transformation. After stomaching summer nights along with the rest of us, Rizzo knows full well that Danny is the subject of Sandy's song, and therefore he's a hypocrite. Setting up a surprise meeting between them is her way of removing Danny's mirror. What an antagonist she is. As the Pink Ladies approach, Danny can be heard expounding upon the mission before them. Fixing up the car for the exclusive purpose of getting laid comes across as crude and vulgar, but it also serves as intentional foreshadowing to the mid-movie catalyst as well as its elevated conclusion. Well, Danny sees Sandy and vice versa. Keep in mind, they're standing in the outer darkness. Sandy beams with delight, typical Sandy, whereas Danny fumbles with his mirror image and reverts back to his old self, kind of with a high-pitched voice, Sandy, but only in a moment of weakness. When Danny realizes that his bonded brothers do not approve of his attitude towards the lady, he succumbs to the irrational and immature animalistic nature suggested by the beat-down hot rod, struggling to find any number of ways to belittle her. Very immature ways of belittling her. The filmmakers once again cut back and forth between Danny and Sandy, just as they had done during their daytime duet, but this time it is to sever their close proximity in the darkness rather than fuse a flame. It's actually really well done, where it doesn't really show them in the same scene together. It just cuts back and forth between their faces. So even though you figure they're like several feet apart, it feels more like they're a world removed. Whereas during the Summer Night song, it felt like they were, kind of fused at the hip, even though they didn't know they existed. Even though they are technically embodying the same scene, social programming has done its intended work. The gig is up. Cheerleader Sandy is not a T-Bird anima, as assuredly as T-Bird Danny is not her animus. Sandy throws her pom-poms down at Danny's feet, insisting that he is a fake, a phony, etc., and that she wishes she had never met him. The fact of the matter is that both are having a Princess Kaguya moment. Neither are embodying their true self, and we're going to see their true self develop later on. Danny considers removing his mirror and chasing after her. You could clearly see him. You could see him thinking this. More foreshadowing. We see him standing alone in the parking lot while the T-Birds migrate towards the car. Is it another moment of weakness? When the greasers call him over, Danny submits to peer pressure and retreats to his baser animal instincts. The likelier scenario is that Danny's strength has never been challenged. A woman has inspired man to become man, uppercase man, albeit a woman embodying a woman, uppercase woman embodying lowercase woman, and Danny failed the test. Frenchie apprehends Sandy off to the side and expresses a curious level of animosity towards men for a teenage girl, given her amoeba on fleas on rats biting a dog pep talk. Must be 17 going on 37 like the rest of the cast. She then says the only man a girl can depend upon is her daddy, which is interesting given there are no daddies to depend upon in this existential film. None whatsoever. Everyone must navigate through the maze-like corridors of meaning on their own. The sleepover at Frenchie's house serves as an initiation rite into the cult of the Pink Ladies and presumably into womanhood. For Sandy, it is yet another act of deconstruction. After a brief makeover, Sandy is offered a cigarette, which she chokes on, and a bottle of wine, courtesy of Rizzo. After announcing her intent to drop out of high school in favor of beauty school, Frenchie then offers to pierce Sandy's ears. Not a coincidence. In the Torah, particularly Exodus 21:6, a slave's ear was pierced with an awl against a doorpost to symbolize voluntary permanent servitude and loyalty to a human master over divine freedom. The same case can certainly be made here. The piercing of an ear is comparable to the losing of one's virginity. So it is not surprising that Rizzo mocks Sandy's lack of carnal knowledge while the deed is done. It is additionally curious that Sandra bleeds in the bathroom. I call her Sandra there, I guess, because Sandra D. Sandy bleeds in the bathroom as though her hymen is tearing. And furthermore, the person attending to her is destined to drop out of beauty school. False identities are casting shadows all around. While Sandra bleeds in the other room, Rizzo breaks into her "Look at me, I'm Sandra D" number, inspired by the blonde wig she has put on. Specifically, she looks into a mirror, a clue. I will remind you that Sandra is the only character who does not require a mirror to put her face on. So if I had to guess, Rizzo is jealous of Sandy's innocence, a frustration deriving from her own ability to find happiness through the same purity. Let me read that again, because I think this is real. I don't want you to miss this. If I had to guess, Rizzo is jealous of Sandy's innocence, a frustration deriving from her own inability to find happiness through that same purity. Her sarcasm and tough exterior is therefore an armor against vulnerability. Returning from the bathroom, Sandy catches Rizzo in her mockery and must confront the fact that she must perceive herself through the eyes of others. It's a very self-conscious moment. Speaking of which, Rizzo's mirrored obsession with Sandra's looks resembles the jealousy of the Wicked Queen in Snow White. Might I suggest that Rizzo, being the second princess prototype in this production, embodies the divine archetype which we have already encountered through Maleficent in Sleeping Beauty? Who is jealous of Heavenly Woman's insertion on the earth but Mother Nature? And so, I would suggest to you that Rizzo represents Mother Nature. It's something that comes up often in, it's a divine embodiment that comes up often in fairy tales in which they are jealous of the purity of the princess, the beauty and the purity. Kaneki, Danny, and the T-Birds pull up to Frenchie's house in the 48 Ford, inciting Rizzo to ditch the goodies at the sleepover through the bedroom window. Climbing down a trellis without assistance opposes the maiden in the tower motive and the purity required of a lady like Rapunzel to remain within. By the way, this is what I'll be talking about next week, the lady in the tower. Her action is further conscious. So what I'm saying is that Rizzo actually contrasts that, where you see Sandra D or Sandy stay in the tower. She represents the maiden in there, and Rizzo is the jealous mother in Rapunzel that keeps her locked up there. Her action is further contrasted by a member of the T-Birds inciting a line from Shakespeare calling upon Sandy's whereabouts rather than Juliet's. In yet another stunning move, Rizzo seems to offer herself to either Kaneki or Danny if he should be so inclined. Danny rejects her advances, claiming sloppy seconds isn't his style, and jumps out of the car as a form of protest. She then returns the insult by suggesting he's going off to flog his log because purity doesn't get the job done. Rizzo's connection with Mother Nature, or more specifically, Gaia, the primordial deity of Earth, is strengthened by the fact that she climbs into the car with Kaneki, demanding that the other T-Birds get out and walk. Do you recall that the car is in its basest, most primal, pre-metamorphic state? Moments later at Makeout Mountain, Kaneki and Rizzo are committed to doing the deed only to discover that his rubber is defective. Rizzo gives it a moment's thought before succumbing to her passion, concluding, "What the hell?" This is the catalyst event which will tinker with the balance between the foundational energy of nature's sexual creative force and divine union. Back at Frenchie's, Sandy learns of Marty's wide variety of pen pals when an entire accordion insert of boys unfolds from her wallet. She offers any one of them to Sandy, but Sandy only wants Danny. Thus, we receive another song to the soundtrack. Olivia's Hopelessly Devoted to You actually managed to play like a stereotypical 1950s heartache ballad decades before the hostile feminist takeover, in which women base their identity upon the man or alternately missing man in their life. And that's, of course, before the 1970s takeover. And so they actually managed to capture that pretty well. Writing a pen pal letter to her summer fling while separating herself from the group once again helps to illustrate her present alienation on the earth, while further correlating Danny's fractured androgynous state. She bends down and sets the letter adrift in a conveniently placed kiddie pool, which is on the front lawn, as though sending it across the world from down under. Well, I'm here to tell you that the pool is round like our world and that water is level as certainly as the earth is flat. Moving on to Grease Lightning. Moving on from Patsy Cline to Elvis Presley, if sing-alongs and well-choreographed dances are your thing, then perhaps you will like Grease Lightning. Danny takes charge of this bromance duet rather than Kenickie, giving it his best Uncle Jesse from Full House impersonation. And isn't that strange? It's Kenickie's car. He hauled boxes all summer saving up to get a, quote, pussy wagon. Mission accomplished then. Look, I get it. Danny is the star, and this is potentially his fever dream, the moment he's dying. But even Rizzo manages 2 songs. Anyways, the mystery religions had enclosures or caverns where the neophyte would meet their god, maybe even emerge as one. And Rydell High looked to have the same. It actually happens a couple times in this movie. Thomas Jefferson, Thomas Paine, Karl Marx, Vladimir Lenin, Benito Mussolini, and Adolf Hitler all wrote manifestos to their movement, which just so happens to be what Grease Lightning is, unapologetically serving as the core religious movement of this 2-hour musical endeavor. Like the Greaser, hot rodding became a critique and an act of rebellion, albeit a disciplined one, aimed against the cookie-cutter suburban sprawl of post-World War II society and quite literally a counterculture in itself. Hot rodding formed the bridge between primal passion and technical precision, something which every man inspired by the true woman can get behind. Their insurgency found its legs, or rather wheels, in the belief that beauty is not found in a polished factory car, but in the gritty effort of the builder. Assembly lines did not produce souls. Only the maker could become a father, endowing a piece of himself into his creation, kind of like a golem. Taking broken machinery and dead parts from the scrapyard and then transforming chaos into orderly power ensured that the mechanic became a wizard, for lack of a better word, in his own right. Oh, and I don't know if you noticed, the 48.4 Deluxe went from white to red during the song and dance number. I didn't think much of the paint job until Grease Lightning quite suddenly became white again at the song's conclusion, like snap, it went white. Or rather, it was white all along. The red was an illusion. If you need this spelled out for you, the Ford is white for the entire movie, except for a brief intermediary scene in shop class in which it is momentarily transformed red. What an odd creative choice to make. Adding to my curiosity is the temporary transparent hood, which allows the viewer to gaze below the surface into the engine. Obviously, the red color and the transparent hood were not designed to be a part of the objective reality of the story, but to offer insight into the character's internal state. The car began its journey as a dirty white character in dire need of love and spiritual cleansing, which the boys down at Rydell can offer. The white to red transition is more of that alchemy, likely representing the shift from passive purity and innocence to power, blood vitality, and maybe even some wisdom for the weekend cruising. The philosopher's stone, by the way, is often described as a powder or stone, and in either case to be a deep red color like the car. And I checked. It's red in Harry Potter as well. In alchemy, the philosopher's stone is the final stage of the magnum opus, which allows the albedo or white stone and is believed, which follows the white stone, excuse me, and is believed to enable the transmutation of base metals into gold, serving as the elixir of life for immortality. So, explaining to you why they made it red right there was not an accident. Now, the Frosty Palace. Danny's transformative moment in Rydell's garage is only heightened by the following segment at the Frosty Palace, in which Sandy is oblivious and furthermore uninterested in his recent accomplishment. Unlike the school cafeteria, the 1950s malt shop offered the teenager an oasis free from adult supervision, a sacred space, and a sanctuary for socializing among all walks of life, as though a truce were offered. So we shouldn't be surprised to find open diplomacy here. The exterior is first shown to us while Kaniki and Danny watch the untamed scorpions cruise by. Frosty Palace can be seen in big, bold letters. It's hard to miss the snowman looking so out of the ordinary. A snowman gives us form out of formlessness, life out of death, though never permanent, as it can begin to melt within hours or even minutes. It is truly existential to the bone in true Peanuts Charles Schultz fashion. Why is a falling leaf beautiful? Because it does not last. Among the four cyclic seasons, winter embodies death, which I think that this scene probably takes place kind of symbolically in that time of year in winter. So a snowman reminds us of the unity of opposites and the potential for spiritual transformation or self-realization, themes which will not be wasted here. It should also be noted that snowmen originate from ancient pagan winter effigies, representing a guardian or spirit of the season. Think that's a stretch? Well, think long and hard about that one, because Frosty Palace does not disappoint. Next to the snowman is a banana split. A little later on, Sunny will order one, calling it a dog sled delight. The sexual innuendo is obvious. Even a mention of mom's apple pie is given the same innuendo. There's another potential interpretation of the banana split that I think is worth your time. A banana split also suggests duality, the integration of various parts into a whole, and contrarily, a split or broken nature. Just you wait, and you won't have to wait long, because the banana split is intended to work its way through your subconscious. When Kaniki asked Danny if he's still thinking about that girl, girl from Australia, Danny dishonestly shrugs her off, though it is interesting to see Kaneki coming around and insinuating that it is okay if he is. At the diner, barriers are beginning to break down. Exiting the little girl's room and continuing with the Mother Earth archetype, Rizzo homes in upon Sandy on a date with the jock, Tom, with a noted level of intolerance. Is she resentful that a princess has infiltrated the Pink Ladies, thereby threatening the stability of the projected image? Or is she jealous of Danny's affection for her? Probably both. Jung's animus and the anima are openly revisited and explored when Sandy excuses herself from the table to select another song in the jukebox, as though seemingly bored with her date. Danny does the same, bored with the T-Birds' inability to rise above their base hormones. At the jukebox, Danny criticizes Tom's lack of intellect, suggesting that his brains are in his muscles. Sandy doesn't disagree. She simply shrugs off Danny's own lack of accomplishments in the face of Tom's athleticism. Sandy is having another Princess Kaguya moment. Albeit a princess from heaven, she is mistaking the construct of Rydell for truth, believing the top jock must be the true man and that her role as a cheerleader will bring fulfillment to her role, as assuredly as Danny's act of rebellion against the system automatically pits him in the wrong, even if she's attracted to his intellectual stimulation. And that's something that you constantly see with Danny. He's bored of just the base talk. He wants to rise above it. He doesn't know how. and she just sees him as base and animalistic. Now that Kaniki has opened the door for Danny to pursue Sandy's animus, Danny immediately embraces an existential crisis. He tries his hands at sports and fails miserably at it. There is simply no pay grade capable of explaining Coach Calhoun's exclusive dedication to Danny as he tries his hand at basketball, baseball, and wrestling, fumbling, fouling, or striking out with every offering. Eventually, he settles on track and field, the chain smoker's delight. Despite tripping over a hurdle and landing on his face, his mirrored reflection is just enough for Sandy to finally notice. Ditching Tom on the bleachers, she meets Danny on the track and accepts his offer to go to the dance, so long as he stays in his lane, pun intended. By the way, I do believe there is redemptive quality to Danny's actions joining sports. Many will assume Danny is not being true to himself, and I suppose in hindsight he is not. But then even Sandy has fallen into confusion, mistaking the traditions of men for the genuine. It is good that Danny is willing to step outside of his own mirrored reflection, seeking for the truth beyond and within while allowing for missteps. Again, no pun intended. Though his initial motivation in embracing seems external, the act of dedicated effort, even facing potential failure while developing the skills, the jockstrap, once again, the skills of the jockstrap, once again shifts the focus from a skin deep goal to the internal process of self creation. So the reunited couple immediately return to the Frosty Palace. So it's almost like they just go from the Frosty Palace sports right back to the Frosty Palace. And here the School of Young commences as if the sports montage was intended to illustrate the meaning behind the banana split. The ever self-conscious Danny attempts to hide behind a menu only to be discovered by the Pink Ladies and T-Birds. The last time the entire gang gathered together was while standing briefly in the outer darkness. When Sandy asked Danny out to tea with her parents, Danny knocks down the offer despite Sandy insisting that he likes tea in front of the group. Clearly, Danny is trapped in the egotistical or egoic prison, a hell which is more of a state of mind rather than a location where the door is locked from within. Self-consciousness began when humanity developed an ego apart from the divine, which brings us back to the tree of knowledge. Eating from the tree brought about the ability to perceive oneself as an independent entity rather than part of the unified whole. In this egoic prison, the prisoner is obsessed with his own identity, personality, and desire, disconnected from the divine source, which in this instance is Sandy. So once again, here to contrast the princess from heaven is the earth-based Mother Nature figure Rizzo, who unashamedly reveals her hickey for the group. A hickey is a love bite as well as a mark of possession and a temporary tattoo, as they are sometimes known. The results of unbridled passion during a moment of intense, devouring desire and a transferring of lustful energies. Well, anyways, self-consciousness is treated as an excessive awareness of how others perceive oneself, though in this instance, it is utilized as a critical stage in Danny's soul as he journeys towards awakening. The hickey hopes to illustrate that Rizzo and Kaniki are by all appearances the car in its primal state, whereas Danny is seeking a hot rod experience. Sandy is simply incapable of understanding the transformation happening. So everyone leaves the Frosty Palace except for Frenchie. We get a whole nother segment at the Frosty Palace. She stays behind to finally get a song sung about her. I probably stated earlier that Greece treats rock and roll as an ancient mystery religion and that the temple experience is given its fair shake. That was very much true during the Grease lightning sequence, but even more so here. No sooner does the waitress shut the lights off and locks up when Frenchie has a vision. Frankie Avalon, of all people, descends an elevated stage, a teenage god surrounded by angels. Tell me that's not a mystery religion experience. Go ahead. I dare you. You will try, but will not succeed. In Pinocchio is Dead, another paper I wrote, I noted the intended similarity between Pinocchio with Lucius as well as the Blue Fairy with Isis. uh, Pinocchio walked the foolish path. Yeah, and I probably left out a line here. I'm talking about the golden ass, which is one of the only surviving accounts of the mysteries of Isis, which Pinocchio is based upon. Pinocchio walked the foolish path, choosing slavery rather than education, decisions which will ultimately transform him into a donkey. He then redeemed himself by living selfishly, selfishly, yeah, not selfishly. After dying in the belly of a whale and an embodiment of Leviathan and representation of the abyss, the blue fairy rewarded Pinocchio by reassuring him, or resurrecting him, excuse me, by resurrecting him into a real boy. Lucius takes a similar path in the Golden Ass, even becoming a donkey. When the neophyte finally meets Isis, she assigns him his slice of the pie. So the same thing happens here with Frenchie. Frenchie is the Pinocchio of this story, Frankie the fairy queen. She has taken a very wrong turn. Maybe he's more like rather than the fairy queen, maybe he's more like uh, I'd have to think who he's more like, which god, but it doesn't matter. She has taken a very wrong turn when dropping out of Rydell to pursue beauty school, which she has also failed at miserably. The fact that she has dyed her hair pink by way of an accident is a curious touch. Was she not a pink lady? Is that connection intended? The choice color of the pink ladies purposely toyed around with gender roles, noting that pink became the standard for a girl only after World War II, thanks to capitalist marketers hoping to outsmart the hand-me-downs. In the 1950s, feminine girls were suddenly expected to swap out the blue for pink. Oops, that must have slipped my mind in my Sleeping Beauty commentary. The film was released in 1959, only 1 year after when Grease was supposed to take place. And while Aurora, or Sleeping Beauty, dances upon the checkerboard of duality, you can see it right there with Prince Philip, her fairy godmothers magically alter her dress from blue to pink and blue to pink, blue to pink, as if they cannot decide on the color. So that was kind of commentary right then on the 1950s and how women were being changed from pink to blue. I think it is safe to say that the pink ladies wore theirs as commentary and protest. Regardless, pink hair highlights her degradation into an existential crisis, as if the pink ladies hadn't already chosen existentialism for a name and a uniform. It is quite possible that her accident signals a desperate need to break away from the black and white grays of daily life and prioritizing her joy, self-acceptance, and all-around emotional well-being. As a reminder, Grease is ultimately a 1970s story, giving praise to 1950s culture where it was not celebrated, and in other areas subduing what was elevated of the 1950s. So the Sandy character is, subdued in this. I have met many women in my lifetime, believe it or not, who happily confessed they married immediately after high school, sometimes within the week, and that doing so was considered the norm. Perhaps they were not so happy if that marriage did not last. Feminism undoubtedly contributed to the divorce epidemic, but that is the subject of another research paper. Marriage was the expected first step, the threshold into adulthood, and to the point that the average age of marriage dipped to its lowest point in the 1950s, attaining a record low of the age of 20 when women got married, with as many as 10% of women marrying before the age of 18. We're talking 16, 17 here. Many women attended college with the primary goal of finding a husband. The social pressure, I am told, was extreme upon a woman to choose the expected path, and then not doing so often led to societal suspicion. So, a raise of hands. Who else noticed that Rizzo and Marty double as beauty school angels? Yet another curious choice, don't you think? I'll just place this one here. Doppelgangers. Done a little research on that. A doppelganger is a celestial double who serves as a guardian protector. They may also be in identical spirits, a concept completely possible and perhaps even demonstratable in biology through fermentation in a split egg, and Viola, or voila, I should say, Voila, identical twins. My wife happens to be one, an identical twin. So I guess you could say I have spent the entirety of my adult life thinking about this. So ask your local Persian mystic or Gnostic. Every soul has a celestial counterpart embodying their highest perfected self. I'm just the messenger, okay? And so, in Greece terms, the doppelganger is a positive divine mirror intended to defeat the narcissist. A divine being and his angels, aka Frankie and the girls, have manifested to reveal Frenchie's true individual potential, steering her toward a different life path rather than the norm. Rizzo and Marty have arguably lost their spiritual connection and thus failed to guide. And I'm talking about the earthly Rizzo and Marty. So they're angel twins, interestingly enough, have therefore chosen to play the part of Frenchie's Pink Lady protectors. Again, I don't think that's a reading too much into that at all. Moving on to the National Dance Off. I've had the audacity to drop a few links and then move on with limited explanation, and I'm about to do it again. Teenagers, an American invention. There, I said it, and I'm not taking it back. Claiming that teenagers are an American invention and that we needn't look much further beyond the chairman of the board, Frank Sinatra, just so happens to be one of the oldest papers I've written, dating all the way back to 2009. So it's been nearly 20 years now of holding my ground. At only a few pages, it's baby size, being a baby paper of mine, and makes for great bathroom reading. So enough commentary on that because, I already covered it in there. In the intervening years, I have offered coverage on the many ways in which culture is the geoengineered result of the intel community and the like. From JFK to Jonestown goes with the premise that the 60s as a decade was manufactured. Jim Morrison was a likely intel operation, one of many, of course, as were the Manson murders and the CIA funds artwork. The Paul is Dead conspiracy was a death and resurrection ceremony at its finest. And don't even get me started on Woodstock. The Jews were behind that one, you know. You're just going to have to accept my premise that it's all by design and that a spoonful of sugar helps the nihilism go down. It's only appropriate then that National Dance Off, a stand-in for American Bandstand, the MTV of its day, showed up at Rydell to drop Operation Mockingbird into the teenage experiment. Rizzo is the leader of the Pink Ladies, as assuredly as Kaneki is the T-Bird counterbalance. Rizzo is a jealous creature, and jealousy is a habit lends to a destructive nature, aka Mother Earth. Jealousy is a barrier to personal enlightenment, choking spiritual growth at its source. If left unchecked, its gale force can act as an internal disease, spreading gangrene and corrupting the soul, causing practitioners to lose sight of their true divine purpose. It can also attract lower level demonic entities, which is precisely what happens in the scene following the beauty school angels. Rizzo chooses the leader of the Scorpions for a date to the dance, thereby throwing everything out of balance. The thing about demons, as we have come to learn with the ascension of Isaiah and the Testament of Solomon, is that they aspire to the high and lofty place, but cannot ascend beyond the firmament. His name, the leader of the Scorpions, is Leo Balmudo, by the way, though he is frequently referred to as Crater Face. I'm going out on a limb here, but I will direct you to the Watcher's release and the 190 crypto explosion sites found all over the world, aka Crater Face. Kaneki certainly doesn't help to alleviate the situation by bringing Leo's girl Cha-Cha as his date. Sparks will fly. Fights will break out. So it is safe to say that the leader of the T-Birds has also lost sight of his true divine purpose. The results of their decisions will be made known in the third act as both become physically handicapped in a way due to their malpractice. Well, Danny gets out onto the dance floor with Sandy, and all of a sudden we are inhabiting a Saturday Night Fever movie. They don't even try to hide that fact when dressing John Travolta in shirt collars large and pointy enough to jab Grace Kelly's eyes out. They gave the 1950s a good run, I guess. Dance is a sacred act, and that requires presence and trust. Executed correctly, the right side of one partner mirrors the left side of the other, creating energetic harmony and balance. It is movement, but even more so, it is surrender. Breaching that trust by dancing with another partner will result in immediate misalignment. Pause. Have I covered the rule of Matt yet? I mean, it's been tackled in other research papers of mine, like The Lion King, but what of this one? So Matt takes us back to ancient Egypt and describes the embodiment of truth, balance, order, harmony, law, morality, and justice. And there's a similar concept given to us in Star Wars, if you need a reference, and it's called the balance of the Force. So a little bit of the dark side throws everything off. Unlike Osiris and the mysteries of Isis, nobody is murdered that I know of in Greece, though I think it is perfectly fair to view Craterface as the jealous Set who dismembers Kaneki. You know what I'm talking about. Newsflash, in Ham's Mystery Children, Gods Among Men, I made the case that Osiris and Isis were righteous rulers who were friends of Melchizedek, just so we get our ducks in a row here. Excuse me. The arrival of Cha Cha back into Danny's life, who is described as an old friend of the family, quote unquote, and looks to be, again, 17 going on 37, pulls the rug out on Matt. I mean, it was going well for a moment. Danny got the girl and was on the disco highway to heaven by all appearances until Sonny stole Sandy off the floor as a joke, thereby allowing Cha Cha to move in. Sandy runs off in embarrassment, and I don't blame her. Danny is a jerk. I've never seen Staying Alive, the sequel to Saturday Night Fever, but he's probably a jerk in that one too. Danny has been given a test and is weighed in the balance. Remember when I said the Scorpions are a necessary mirror intended to reflect Kaneki or Danny's potential weaknesses, or really their shadow? Their blind spots have just been exploited. Moving on to the drive-in. Grease aims to tap into nearly every aspect of stereotypical teenage life and does a pretty good job at it. Having the T-Birds and the Pink Lady spend a night in the drive-in doesn't simply check off a box. You are made aware that this is an esoteric analysis, right? So a flickering movie screen reminds us of Plato's allegory of the cave, blending the Republic with communal ritual. It portrays chained prisoners mistaking shadows on the wall for reality. The meaning behind his parable, or Plato's, is that humans accept limited perceptions in the world of illusion rather than seeking higher true knowledge in the world of forms. Employing a drive-in as the backdrop of an Eisenhower-era movie may come across as superficial in many instances, but here it perfectly exemplifies the disorientation in its characters as they mistake shadows for the real thing. The movie they are watching is an early Steve McQueen outing known as The Blob. Released in 1958, the film has long been commented upon as Cold War propaganda intended to promote and prey upon the fears of communist infiltration. Far more pointedly to the story already underway is the second story layer. The, the Blob embellishes the nihilistic distrust of authority when a generational divide of teenagers, as embodied by McQueen, witnesses the danger in jelly, and the skeptical authorities refuse to believe him until it is too late. There's a third layer to this. The escapist interpretation sees the Blob as a metaphor for the way society is consumed by its own jobs, marriages, and responsibilities. Place a bookmark on that thought because I intend to return to it, and actually very soon. Another thing about the drive-in is that it can represent a crossroads or borderland between the physical world and the spiritual astral plane. Yes, I am throwing more of that Plato at you. So it is interesting that Danny makes his first pass on Sandy since their evening on the beach months prior. I am assuming you haven't forgotten my hypothesis that their summer nights refers to a prior existence in the heavenly realm. Danny assures Sandy that there is nothing going on between him and Cha-Cha, even though she was a mystery woman from his past. If Danny and Sandy are an Adam and Eve figure, as I suspect, then Cha-Cha is the Lilith in this fairy tale, representing in this instance as a reclamation of the shadow self. I'm not going over my Lilith research again, so feel free to do so if you'd like. Her name was Lilith. There it is, the link. Lilith is eternally at war with the sons of Adam, being the mother of evil spirits, And remember, I liken the rival gang, the Scorpions, coming in as evil spirits, and apparently all the rage with the feminist Lilith. She is the matriarch of the feminists officially. I've looked that up, so I would not be surprised to learn that Cha Cha has become a role model for many left leaning women in the Grease fan base. Sandy struggles believing Cha Cha's ambiguous backstory, which is why Danny offers Sandy his ring. He is hoping to take the traditional social route, though on a deeper level, a ring is a closed circle representing eternity, unbroken unity, and a divine connection sealing promises. That is to say, both are trying this man and woman business on for size without having the necessary gnosis, and neither can seem to figure it out, at least not together. At least he didn't give her a hickey. Sandy gleefully accepts his ring as a token of their commitment. But then moving in for a kiss, Danny is outright rejected. His happiness goes especially south when Sandy climbs out of the bench seat, aiming a car door directly at his inner thigh, thereby ending the happy moment. That was unnecessarily and totally below the belt. Sandy's impromptu decision to leave Danny on their date leads Danny into a crooning solo called Sandy, in which he sits on a swing set with his back turned to the flickering movie screen. That is highly symbolic. World. The only thing that would make that, excuse me, the only thing that would have made this scene better is if they were watching a 3D movie. The swing set as well. I mean, Danny is an adult, not a child. He sings the whole song on a swing set. That particularly stood out to me during my viewing. I take it to mean we are witnessing a bridge between the conscious, responsible world of adulthood and the subconscious, innocent, and playful world of the inner child. And this will be contrasted in the scene with Kaneki. This is, after all, a borderland. What Danny is looking for is emotional balance and a return to simplicity. He may have thought he discovered meaning with his fabricated mirror image, but then Sandy miraculously arrived back into his life and the illusion was shattered. So here's some of the lyrics from the song. Someday when high school is done, somehow, some way, our two worlds will be one. In heaven forever and ever we will be. 3 sample lines from Sandy. Rydell is clearly a stand-in for the material realm, a socially engineered construct designed to keep their two worlds apart. We should keep a lookout for the wheats and the tares. In saying 2 separate units will become one, he is invoking a marriage of spirits in heaven. I am also reminded of a passage from the Gospel of Philip, which says this: when Eve was in Adam, there was no death. When she was separated from him, death came. If she enters back into him and he accepts her, there will be no more death. That's the Gospel of Philip 71. Soul flames. That is what they are. Despite never having sexual intercourse, Danny and Sandy were united together on the summer prior until the moment when they were severed at Rydell. Their only hope of achieving heavenly bliss is to fuse their souls together again. With lyrics like these, Danny is not swimming strictly in the water of his surface deep hormones. I've showed this illustration a lot, this illumination. I love it to death. I'll scroll up to it in a second. You can kind of just look at it. Given the esoteric meaning of a hot rod, the car should definitely not go unnoticed at a drive-in. How about a brief lecture in chivalry? The very word chivalry comes from the French chevalier and literally means knight or horseman. In my Chess Mysteries of the Millennial Kingdom paper, we saw that a knight is depicted as a horse in chess. The explanation for that one is easy enough. The horse represents the mortal body, complete with its associated energies and emotions, with the horseman embodying the higher self, which every chivalrous man aspires for. Now take all that you have learned and apply it to this astonishing illumination from the 14th century Codex Manesse. I spent hours of my life staring at it over the years. So look at all that is happening. I'll let you kind of scroll up there again. I can't read from this while you look at it. I'll just take a quick sip of coffee. Take a mental shot of it as I describe it. Underneath the water, the demons embedded within our subconscious are the shadows warring of our souls, the antagonists, the people that we claim are other people that are really us. The horse is arguably oblivious while treading upon them because, again, they're under the surface of the water. You have to go fishing for them, right? The demons. Except for the fact that the physical animal body is not only harnessed to a knight, which is our higher self, but to a feminine divine figure having come down from heaven. She is crowned, must be a queen. She carries the flame of illumination and the arrow that pierces hearts. St. Teresa of Avila was featured in a little research paper I wrote, The Interior Castle. And in that one, I compared the narrative structure in The Matrix with the 7 degrees of the mystery religions and the 7 interior rooms of Teresa's castle. I asked you to wear the glove, and it fits. In fact, they all fit. All the mystery religions, including the tabernacle mysteries in the Torah, like a glove. So who is this fair damsel who the knight is saving? She is wisdom, the Ruach HaKamaha. It is more likely that she is saving him, but only in the sense that woman is inspiring man to become man. We might as well be staring at the movie poster for Greece had it come out in the 14th century. So just exchange that the horse to a hot rod. Then, of course, there's Danny driving it. There's Sandy standing above him, bringing down the flame of illumination. And then, of course, the Scorpions, the other rival gang, maybe even Kaneki and Rizzo would be under the water down there. So elsewhere at the drive-in, Marty apprehends Rizzo in the little girl's room, wanting to know why she hasn't been acting her usual self. Rizzo confesses she's missed her period. She looks into the mirror when saying it too, specifically referring to herself as a quote-unquote defective typewriter. Boom. There it is. Rizzo represents female autonomy and sexual agency, but not from the perspective of higher truth or even the laws of science for that matter. It is only a little ironic that she referred to herself as defective for the mere fact that her body was working precisely as it was intended to. Sex has a biological purpose. I hate to break the news, but it is for the purpose of procreation. It also has a spiritual purpose for exceeding the biological, far exceeding the biological, though neither cannot be divorced if sex is to achieve its purpose. The feminists will make a role model out of Rizzo, though it is so apparent that her mirror image is in complete misalignment with her subconscious as well as her higher spiritual self. Though Marty promises to take her secret to the grave, Rizzo's bun in the oven rumor spreads through the congregation as quick as the blob can consume victims on the screen, which again, that's kind of intended, I think, to mirror the movie, thereby growing larger. Even quicker than Rizzo can return to her car where Kaneki is waiting with the news. Kaneki isn't even angry. He manages to accept responsibility for, quote unquote, the mistake, offering to take care of her and the baby. Of course he did. Of course he would. Any true hot rodder would. This is the same guy, the same Kaneki, who worked a job all summer to save up for a car when others wouldn't. It's the same Kaneki who labored in the garage at Rydell souping up its engine. To quote Jung again, Carl Jung, he is a sorry knight who shrinks from the difficulty of loving his lady. This is a man who was ready to accept the responsibilities of adulthood. So now we have the escapist interpretation of the blob at play. Rizzo quickly denies that Kaneki is the father, to his face. I think everyone is in agreement that she said it to hurt him. That's her kind of protective stance, keeping him at arm's length. Well, I've got more to add to that. Claiming she had secured a child with another man only ended up emasculating him. Moving on to Thunder Road. Another claim that Rizzo made to Marty in the drive-in bathroom is that she didn't know the man. Initially, I thought she was lying. Wasn't the conception moment given to us in the backseat of the Ford? It was, right? There are no wasted scenes in this movie. Now that I have managed this far into the esoteric analysis, I'm suspect that the leader of the Scorpions is the culprit. Leo showed up at Makeout Mountain too, with Cha-Cha on the bench seat. And when he arrived, it was to put a dent into Kanicki's bumper, literally, with his own drag racer. There's probably a metaphor to be found there. Leo's candidacy seems especially applicable during her second solo song number, There Are Worse Things I Could Do, in which she says the following: There are worse things I could do than go with a boy or two. Yeah, I think that pretty much sums it up. Kaneki may be the father, but then again, he might not. Feel free to discuss. She certainly wants him to be. Her affection for Kaneki is hinted at as she stands alone watching him speed off the Thunder Road. Ironically, to compete against the other candidate. Grease Lightning has finally been transformed. It is the day of the big race, and even Sandy will be there for the match, but not Rizzo. Sandy, Danny, and Frenchie have all experienced alienation, either from Rydell or the group. But for Rizzo, it's probably the worst. She is alienated from her own body. I guess I'll go ahead and read the lyrics to the song. I'm not going to sing it for you. You can sing it for yourself. Yeah, I mean, you were probably already singing all the songs in your head already. So I could flirt with all the guys, smile at them and bat my eyes, press against them when we dance, make them think they stand a chance, then refuse to see it through. That's a thing I'd never do. I could stay home every night, wait around for Mr. Right, take cold showers every day, and throw my life away on a dream that won't come true. I could hurt someone like me out of spite or jealousy. I don't steal and I don't lie, but I can feel and I can cry. A fact I'll bet you never knew, but to cry in front of you, that's the worst thing I could do. Rizzo is still obsessed with Sandy's goodness. Young noted, quote, to confront a person with their shadow is to also show them their own light. Yeah, well, sometimes the light stings. In her spite and jealousy, being Mother Earth, Rizzo made a mockery of Sandy at the slumber party when dressing up in a wig and beckoning everyone to look at me. She then ditched the intended all-nighter to get laid in the backseat of the Ford as if making a point. Rizzo's every action has been a direct response to the unwelcome alien invader. Her repulsion of the princess archetype might have worked just fine had her own mirrored image not been an illusion to begin with. Remember the defective typewriter statement. Why am I showing you pictures of Martha Stewart? It's because Rizzo seems to be struggling to find her own goodness. You're probably still confused. Don't be. In the 1990s, a funny thing happened on the way to the kitchen when it was discovered that a large percentage of Martha's fan base actually hated her. It may have come as a surprise for the psychologist, but very soon a new phenomena was observed, hate watching. And now we all just take that for granted. Though I like to call it the Martha Stewart effect. You can be certain that the moneymakers were all over it. In little time, we were treated to an entire genre of reality TV shows which existed almost exclusively for the purpose of hate watching. I could throw some examples your way, but they are probably already impregnated in your mind. In this scenario, there are only two types of people in the world: those who gravitate towards self-help, or contrarily, malnourishment. Which are you? Martha Stewart was unfortunate enough to attract both kinds. A person who wants to nourish their life with health and virtue will focus on areas which need improvement, right? They're going to work on the shadow. Whereas a person who doesn't want to aspire towards their higher self will turn their gaze upon those deemed inferior, though they needn't truly be inferior, so that they can elevate their own virtues, albeit through illusion, without needing to improve. So does that make sense? So you find something that you deem worse than you, and you put your gaze on that, and that's all that it automatically elevates you to be a good or righteous person based on you're basing your righteousness on the immoral actions of somebody else. That's hate watching. Quoting Young again, people will do anything, no matter how absurd, to avoid facing their own souls. The last verse in her song is likely addressed to Kaneki and is especially telling. Her entire persona is indeed a mirrored reflection intended to hide her true self. Crying is a spiritual cleansing and release, and I may be a man, but the one thing that I know about women is that they can shed a tear on occasion or two, or on a dime, really. Unlike men, women have higher prolactin levels and lower testosterone. And, anyways, social conditioning allows for the pastime. So, the absence of tears suggests locked in spiritual energy and potential. Her true womanly emotions have been internalized so deeply that they cannot reach the surface to be purified. She isn't pregnant, by the way. Catherine of Aragon experienced a likely phantom pregnancy, and now Rizzo has had her false alarm. This is where Grease also happens to fail as a musical production or a movie. They all do as soon as they lean into their feminist delusions. I suspect Rizzo's misdiagnosis is just a clever way to insinuate abortion without directly suggesting it for the unsuspecting conservative. I hope I am wrong there. What's more, the pregnancy had the effect of shattering Rizzo's false notions via the life of illusion, which she had doctored in the mirror. Rizzo is now forced to wrestle with her image, not through the mirror of her choice, but through the perception of others, which is ironic given that Sandy was pressed into the same position. Calling herself a defective typewriter just goes to show that sexual freedom may signal bodily autonomy, but it does not equal an alignment with bodily biology or the purpose of sex, as I noted. Just ask any pro-choicer, and they have sadly convinced themselves that a baby in the womb is not a human being. Well, some of them might have, but many of them have not. Many of them will say that it's, just it's a disease, really, a parasite, whatever they call it. It has been suggested that Rizzo's pregnancy scare serves as another death and rebirth episode, but not in the way that some might think. She is socially killed by her peers because of the rumor only to be reborn when it is proven false. And when that happens, she is free to return to her life of illusion, sadly enough. A boy or two. I am holding out hope that she has died to the ego in the end. It takes more than a coat of paint at Thunder Road. Wise words. Well, Leo demands that they race for pink slips. That seems rather extreme for a first outing, don't you think? Try not to think. Exoterically, that is. The most unconvincing moment in the movie happens immediately after Kaneki accepts the challenge. And I'm not referring to the fact that Rydell's shop teacher, Mrs. Murdoch, is aiding and abetting in the drag race. What happens is Putzi opens the door while seated behind the wheel of Grease Lightning and bumps Kaneki in the head, thereby knocking him unconscious. It doesn't even look convincing. Okay, sure, let's just go with that. After all, it is very apparent that both Kaneki and Rizzo have become handicapped by their own illusions. The opening credits let us know that Grease Lightning would consume Kaneki, and it happened as promised. Rizzo does not attend the climatic race, and Kaneki does not participate in it. Perhaps this is a good moment to point out that the failure to achieve one's higher self is rarely due to the lack of effort. Clearly, Kaneki has put in the effort. In his instance, as in Rizzo's, the higher self cannot be achieved because it is not something to be gained. Theirs is the necessity of ego death. And yet the fear of losing one's personal identity, albeit an illusion, blocks the divine from permeating. Supposing the struggle is in realizing that the higher and lower selves are ultimately not separate, then they are dealing with a fragmentation of consciousness. That may be because they are holding on to attachments. We have already seen that Grease Lightning is treated as a living character. Perhaps the card disqualified Kaneki, choosing Danny in his place because Danny had already died to the ego and was ready to transcend. The term drag holds a double meaning. It refers to the historic main drag of a town, but also to holding gears longer and extracting maximum potential from the engine. Given all that we have learned with the Codex Manesse, I think it is time to go beyond a mere understanding that the car is the body and the driver its consciousness. A drag race symbolizes the soul's journey. Though in this instance, it is a relentless pursuit of potential and ultimate power through a union of opposites. The drag race requires perfect harmony between the violent, raw power of a horsepower engine and the calm, precise, calculated control of the driver. Kind of interesting to think about. A drag racer has 5 gears, like the 5 senses: sight, hearing, smell, taste, and touch. The 5th dimension and the 5th element come to mind, and that is the stuff of alchemy. 5 is the number of quintessence, bridging the physical and spiritual realms. Likewise, the pentagram is a 4+1 equation representing the microcosm, and that the four limbs represent the physical elements while the head represents spirit. It also falls in line with the nuptial number. According to Pythagoras or Pythagorean tradition, 5 is a marriage of heaven equaling 3 and earth 2. So I'm sensing a theme here. Drag racing involves several senses, including the pungent odors of smoke, burning rubber, and fuel. The common indicator is fire. Heating tires is a necessary destructive force in which the car and driver must pass through a baptism by fire. So there is a lot going on here, don't you think? Excuse me. To quote the feminist, Sandy has yet to take an interest in Danny's toxic masculinity. And yet she shows up for the big event, sitting off in the distance to watch from afar. That is a good thing. Though she is making a deliberate effort to maintain and nourish the relationship rather than having an inherent interest in the game, it really goes beyond that. Sandy is achieving gnosis. What she is learning can only be experienced rather than explained, but allow me to try. Sandy cannot pick and choose what she loves of Danny and then disregard the rest. Should that happen and elements of Danny are expunged, then Danny will no longer be Danny and therefore not the man whom she loves. It takes, unfortunately, a lot of people in relationships not realizing that. Did you notice that Sandy removes her shoes? I did. You could actually see it right there in the photo. You see her shoes sitting next to her feet. Will you also be surprised to learn that her decision to do so is rich with symbolism? For starters, leaving shoes at the door of a home is part of the threshold covenant. It is a symbolic act of shucking off worldly status and identity, which is definitely what Sandy is up to. It's an act of surrender, the offering of herself to her man in total vulnerability, but not in strictly sexual terms. More directly, is an action of purification. Removing one's shoes acts as a conduit to receive the Shekinah, the divine feminine aspect of Allah Hayam. Up until now, the princess has been in exile. Sandy is having another Kaguya moment and coming to learn who she truly is. Rizzo's first solo, Sandra D, was sung in mockery. That must have deeply affected her, seeing as how this is an existential movie. And also because she cannot help but to reprise it after Danny's victory, albeit with new mournful lyrics fit for a funeral. Her lips remain motionless. Are we listening to her inner thoughts? As noted, Sandy can only perceive herself as others see her. I take it that she is finally outside of herself and staring in from their perspective rather than Rydell's, because her admitted aim is to finally say goodbye to Sandra D. Sandy's transformation into a new person is further highlighted by the arrival of Frenchie. It was Frenchie who introduced the princess into the Pink Ladies, as you recall, and now it is Frenchie who leaves the victorious group to celebrate Danny's win at her side. The beauty school dropout was incapable of conforming to a conventional path, and yet she is the only character who has experienced the teen angel. By transforming Sandy into the image of Danny's anima, Frenchie's calling comes full circle. You're the one I want. Ooh, 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 honey. I'm not going to sing it. Sorry. If that's why you arrived here, then my apologies. Not going to happen. Proof that Danny has forsaken his ego is further demonstrated by the fact that he has shown up to the senior carnival looking like a dork in a Letterman sweater. Hasn't he just won a drag race? Shouldn't that entitle him to a coat of leather? The question as it relates to Danny's taste in fashion is not the reason why we're here, is it? His ego death is. And I have just explained a crucial piece of evidence to you. Not that there's any reason to worry. Everyone knows Sandy arrives at the senior carnival smoking a cigarette like a champ. Remember when she choked on it last time? And of course, she's dressed all in leather, ensuring that Danny's existential crisis is short-lived. The Letterman sweater comes off. Or she says, "Tell me about it, stud." How does it go again? Danny's got chills. They're multiplying and he's losing control. He better shape up because she needs a man that can keep her satisfied. I just quoted the first few lines. I didn't sing it. Don't make me sing the rest for you because it's not going to happen. I've been writing a scene for scene analysis for the last few weeks, and I'm just about ready to crack. I truly was as I wrote this. Like I was at the end of my rope. Is Sandy the one having an existential crisis now? And here I thought you were supposed to start the movie script at the point of maximum conflict so as to plunge the audience directly into the action, not end it there. Interesting creative decision on part of its writers. Well, I know I've spoken a lot about death and resurrection ceremonies, but that is just how it is. Senior years are full of them. I mean, thinking back upon my own high school experience, we rehearsed graduation week with a senior carnival, but in the form of a school sponsored all nighter. Being locked indoors from sunset to sunrise served as a symbolic gateway, a portal from one plane to another. And the cast of Grease has much going on as well. So look who beat the DeLorean to the flying car ending by an entire 7 years. Grease Lightning is who. I can spot a homage when I see one, Zemeckis. Just so we're clear, I am no psychologist, and all this is way above my pay grade, but I'll give it the old college try anyways. The flying car is an ascension, which brings us right back around full circle to the beginning of the movie. Danny and Sandy are flying to the heavens. I mean, they clearly are. A location which they inhabited together precisely 1 year earlier while in the state of preexistence. Forgotten about those summer nights already. A cyclic year represents the entirety of a man's life. And I've practically written an entire paper on this concept and Mystery of the Maypole. And yes, Carl Jung makes an appearance in that one as well. Greece has decided to book in the summer when a man achieves his youthful vigor and strength, and Persephone is released from her bondage in Hades. So you can think about the most of this movie represented their spiritual death, but at the very end of it is their ascension out of hell. Meanwhile, in Princess Kaguya terms, they came and overcame, mission accomplished. Danny and Sandy have transcended the earthly limitations of Rydell with its maze of ego mirrors and existential crises, merging spiritual aspiration with material reality. You might say they have escaped the matrix. This is their home run in baseball terms. From a yogic perspective, their upward movement represents a Kundalini life energy in which the ego consciousness transforms into the divine. And don't shoot the messenger. I'm just showing you the comparison similarities. In Princess archetype terms, Adam has reunited with Eve, signifying a new creation. There is no more death, not for them at any rate. If Carl Jung had a say on the matter, I suspect he might describe their ascension at the end of the story as a culmination of individualization rather than a literal escape to heaven. Individualization, some people would call it singularity, but let's just keep with Carl Jung terms. Individualization is the journey into absolute wholeness after the ego has been surrendered. There is even an attributable Jung quote to back the visual imagery given to us in Greece. When naughty Sandy curls her tongue at Danny and says, "Tell me about it, stud," she might as well have stated, "I'd rather be whole than good." What does Carl Jung mean by that? I'd rather be whole than good. Well, for Jung, the final ascension is a singularity event in which both the light and dark within are acknowledged, allowing for the divine to emerge. You can see right here where she goes from white to black, right? The alternative would be repressing the darkness in a prison of light. And who wants that? The self-righteous do, and the narcissist. And probably everyone crawling across the internet with a self-martyrdom complex. Essentially anyone wearing a mask. Lift a rock and they'll come scurrying out like cockroaches. They will likewise project their own shadows upon you and expect you to change so that they won't have to. Religiosity has the bad habit of breeding these types, as I mentioned earlier. Individuation needn't be an escape from the pursuit of righteousness. You don't need to think about it that way. People will be like, what is Noel advocating here? He's saying I should be evil. No, I'm not saying that. It's recognizing who you truly are and stop wearing a mask. It's that simple. No, it simply implies accepting one's full humanity, light and dark, to achieve genuine self-awareness of an artificial perfection. You get it? Because who wants to be artificial in our perfection? I mean, that's how we want other people to view us, but that's not reality. Ascension is the act of taking ownership rather than pretending to be pure and perfect. So here's a great example of this here in Star Wars terms. Some of you are still unhappy. Some of you are thinking I'm playing both sides and promoting the continuation of evil. And if so, then you would be wrong. Look, if you want Danny and Sandy's individuation process spilled out for you in non-musical terms, we can cross genres, then look no further than Luke Skywalker's wardrobe choices in Star Wars. He has made the interesting decision to dress in white, then gray, and finally black. I'll have you know, I got down on the carpet to play with the Kenner toys back in the 80s and noticed these things. In Star Wars, Luke could seemingly do no wrong. And I'm talking about the original Star Wars. For all you kids out there, that's episode 4. The Empire Strikes Back. Luke began to make morally gray decisions, which the Light Brigade disagreed with. If you remember, Yoda and Ben Kenobi did not want him to go to save his friends. And yet he chose to be selfless, and he chose love, which put him in a morally gray position. Finally, in Return of the Jedi, Luke confronted his shadow embodied by who else but Darth Vader. Rather than destroying the antagonist, as the Wizards of Light desired, Luke accepted his own capacity for darkness. There it is. Embracing his father was the same thing as not projecting his own darkness onto him or others. By owning his own penchant for evil, he was able to see the good in others. It was the death of his ego which ultimately transcended Vader into an immortal person. So by embracing his own imperfections, he was able to bring Darth Vader back to the side of good again. So there you see an act of righteousness, right? Star Wars is a masterclass in the school of Carl Jung. Come to think of it, Grease ain't so bad either. So as it turns out, Sandy did have a mirror reflecting her shadow self, and she chose to embrace it. Was Rizzle her duality? Maybe. How about Kaneki with Danny? Maybe. That is probably a fair assessment, especially since there is no other reasonable explanation as to why Danny flew away in Kaneki's car. He also stole his solo there with Grease Lightning. But then again, Danny and Sandy are soul flames. A twin makes for an excellent mirror to the subconscious. Either way, the princess decided to integrate all aspects of the psyche, including the dark and conscious shadow self, rather than repressing them to fit Rydell's superficial standard of goodness. This has been an Esoteric review. I thank you for your time.